Hey everyone, Anark here, and this is another Anark live stream. How's everybody doing? We're here on Halloween. I wasn't even intending for this to be a Halloween live stream this month, but it just turned out that it was on the last Friday of the month, so here I am. I planned this the whole time. This is very well planned out, as you can tell. I definitely know what's going on right now. But yeah, people already showing up. Sweet. All right. Oh, looks like my camera has stopped working, as it seems to be doing a lot lately. We're going to try to just fix that quickly. Yeah, there we go. Getting pretty fast at that. It's I've ordered a new capture card. I think that's what the problem is. Capture card is janky. So I think it's been causing problems, but hopefully the new capture card won't cause these problems. I always know what... Oh my gosh, so annoying. It keeps doing it. Wow. Things are going great. We're off to a good start here. The camera has already turned off like, what, 4 times? Awesome. Super sweet. Let's hope it just keeps up that behavior. As you can tell, I'm really not still fully awake. I am trying to multitask and failing. Let's see here. All right, telling people it's happening. There we go. Let's give people the link. Give people. Oh, I already did that. Nice, good job, Daniel. There we go. Okay, I put it in a few places. We're doing things. We're doing it. Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. A counter-revolutionary capture card. Afternoon caffeination. Yes, I have a pre-workout in this jug of water here. What do you think about that? Is that good? So, yeah, I guess news is I just got a restock on a bunch of copies of Modern Anarchism, parts 1. Oh, behind the mic here. 1, 2, 3, and now part 4. We have copies of all of these now. So if you would like to buy a copy, reach out to me however that you can. DMs are going to be preferred so that I can get your address and all of that, and we can exchange pay information. But yeah, part 4 organization is out now. So these are available. I'm selling them for $10 each. If that sounds like a reasonable price, reach out to me. We'll figure out how to get one shipped to you. But they're pretty cool, honestly. I'm really pleased with how these turned out. Like, they're even color and everything. They got cool stuff in there. Oh yeah, the C&T FAI, phenomenal. We definitely got diagrams. It's not an Anark work without diagrams, right? We gotta have diagrams. What else? We got more diagrams in here. We definitely got diagrams. We got. Oh! I saw the camera blink. That means that it has to be okay. I clicked the thing. I fixed it really fast. See, I'm starting to learn. Yeah, there's lots of good stuff in here. Yeah, some of these diagrams I even made for the video. Oh, yeah, that's the stuff right there. It's still doing it. My God. Nonstop. What is this? It's so annoying. Okay. Wow, it is just blinking on and off constantly right now. Yes, yeah, this is definitely an example of a counter-revolutionary capture card right now. This is not cool. Not cool. There we go. I think I got it fixed. Anyway, that's it. Favorite diagram? Probably actually that one I just showed you. I like it. It demonstrates how a horizontal organization should function. I am evil Waldo. That is absolutely exactly what I was going for. I'm very glad that my costume actually conveyed itself. I was like, I should probably try to dress up as something today. And I was like, well, people are always telling me I kind of look like Waldo when I wear stripes. So here I am. I'm just gonna wear the beanie. I got the circle glasses on already, so I'm good. And then, you know, I would wear the striped shirt. It doesn't even matter if they're the right stripes or the beanie's the right color. It doesn't matter. None of that. But, yeah. So here I am, my low effort costume for Halloween. Probably won't be doing anything for Halloween today. I will probably just be tutoring students pretty much as soon as I stop, stop this live stream. I will be moving on to tutor students for the rest of the evening. You know, I'm sure that those students don't want to be tutored today. It's probably the last day they'd want to be tutored, but nonetheless, we are scheduled to do so. Might reach out to them while I'm on stream and see if anybody wants to cancel. Let's see if, let's see here. What kind of tutoring? I do so many different kinds of tutoring. I can teach just about anything. Yeah, sorry I'm not very lucid right now. My brain's still getting started up. Online websites for learning anarchism. I mean, it seems like that's what my channel is for, right? I have all kinds of materials from really introductory stuff all the way up to very advanced stuff here on the channel. So if you want, just go like watch one of the videos called like Introduction to Anarchism. I'm pretty sure that's literally what the video is called. You can also go look at my anarchist reading list, which is like a 4 or 5 part series or something. There I will give you a ton of introductory texts you can read. If you want to just dive right into the deep end because you're looking for the crunchy answers, then you can watch the Modern Anarchism series. However, I don't really recommend that you start with a Modern Anarchism. I think that's more for somebody that already has a little bit of a grasp of the material and really wants to solidify their understanding. So probably for somebody who's kind of at an intermediate level, and then you could probably continue getting things out of it all the way up through an advanced level. But yeah, no, I think that's what I would tell you. That's literally the point of the channel, is to educate people about political theory and also philosophy. And so I have lots of videos talking about different aspects of anarchism. Blight 327 asks, have you done any work with the IWW? I was a card carrying member in, well, no, actually 2 iterations of the IWW, but I've never been an active member. I just registered and became a member, but I was never really an active organizer with them. They've changed the live stream UI here in YouTube, and I'm just trying to get oriented now in the new UI. It seems useful. Seems good, I think. All right. Well, we're getting more and more people joining the live stream. I'm glad to see y'all here. Yeah, sorry I haven't been very entertaining so far. I actually filmed a video that I was supposed to release today, and it was on the concept of Stoicism and kind of analyzing Stoicism and analyzing whether it is compatible with anarchism or whether it's compatible with a leftist framework. And I was supposed to release that today. However, I worked on it until like 3 in the morning and still was not finished. So then it came to me that I was supposed to live stream today anyway. So that ended up working out. I'll probably just release that video on the next Friday, on the first Friday of this coming month. So Long Defiant, a member for 22 months, says, you've posted a lot about pre-ordering the hierarchy. Could you break that down a little? I think it's a great concept, but I'm just diving in. Thanks. So yeah, pre-order and hierarchy. These are two different, very dense theoretical terms. Pre-order is essentially the process by which a system remakes itself dynamically. So, you know, systems reproduce themselves at all of their junctures. You know, the hierarchical power structures, the prevailing hierarchical power structures of society, they reproduce themselves through structures of the family, domination of the father over the children. They reproduce themselves in the workplaces and having the workers submit themselves to the rule of their bosses and their owners. These hierarchical power structures reproduce themselves at the scale of our social, political systems, such that we have to vote for representatives to rule us. Each of these levels, including the level of the individual psyche, all of these are part of a process called pre-order by which a system reproduces itself. So a pre-order can be either a hierarchical pre-order or it can be a horizontal pre-order. This word pre-order, it comes from the theorists Bickler and Nitzan. And then this phrase hierarchy, or sorry, this word hierarchy, that comes from Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza, who's an intersectional feminist. And hierarchy is essentially the combined structure of hierarchy in a society. It's all of the hierarchies combined together. The hierarchy is essentially the totalizing combination of hierarchical power structures. And so what is pre-ordering the hierarchy? It is essentially the process by which the combined hierarchical power structures of society reproduce themselves at all scales within society. That sort of self-perpetuating process. But yeah, I don't really use that phrase much outside of those theoretical texts because I don't think most people really understand what I'm talking about when I say that. Knowledge and Defense says, what do you think about the pre-Stalinist argument by Marxists about how we either have a rapidly spreading international revolution in the most industrial countries or we become too isolated? I mean, I understand the logic. The logic makes perfect sense. And I certainly don't believe that anybody who thinks that is you know, off track. I think that it kind of makes sense. But the truth is that it doesn't appear as if it's going to happen that way. We had something that looked like that in the early 1900s. However, it didn't really perpetuate far enough for it to have a global revolutionary effect. And in fact, it looks like what ultimately ended up happening was, in fact, that there was an uneven spread, and that all of these different projects that were attempting to carry out some sort of revolutionary process, they had to figure out how to be self-sustaining. And unfortunately, despite the fact that it might be a lot better for us to have a worldwide revolution where it all happens at once, it doesn't really appear as if that's feasible. Instead, what we are going to have to do is probably develop self-sufficient, autonomous revolutionary aspects within our localities, and then we will try to network these together at scale as new versions or new components within these structures arise. So we need to build locally and think globally, as is often said. And the think globally part is federation. It is building federations that group already existing groups together. However, the idea that revolution is only going to take place through a world revolution, even though it sounds nice in theory, it just really doesn't appear to be the case in practice. In fact, the furthest revolutionary activity that we've ever seen has been in the examples of the CNT FAI, in the Free Territories of Ukraine, and in the Zapatistas. And all of these were examples where they had to arise in their regions without much support from elsewhere, and they had to, and in these examples, they were able to move a lot further, it seems, than the ones where there was a contingent world revolutionary movement. So it's not to say, of course, that I think it would be bad to have that world revolutionary movement. It's instead to say that it just does not appear as if that is practical. So I don't really take that position. I understand that that's the orthodox leftist position, but it just doesn't appear that it is actually going to work. I'd love to be wrong. That'd be fantastic. But it just really doesn't look like there's much evidence that that is how things are going to happen. ML Irizarry says, never understood why Stoicism became such a popular trend nowadays. Epicureanism is probably the ancient ideology I would rather prefer had a comeback. Epicureanism is already kind of made a comeback in the form of consequentialism. I mean, Epicureanism is essentially a consequentialist ethical framework. So it's already in existence. We just don't call it Epicureanism. Stoicism doesn't really have a modern parallel. I think its modern parallel would probably be like absurdist existentialism. Maybe Buddhism, I think, has a lot in common with Stoicism. Stoicism is a philosophical position which is about how to live through hard times. And I don't think Epicureanism really has that same power in my experience. It's not to say that it doesn't have anything of value. I am a consequentialist, for example, but no, I think Stoicism is very valuable in giving people the personal tools that allow them to live through difficult times. And I think that's something that, once again, you're really only going to find in a few other places. I think that Buddhism does something very similar, but I don't really agree with its ultimate conclusions about how to live a good life. And I think that, once again, some form of like absurdist existentialism probably would also give us similar tools for how to live a good life. But I think that one thing that's valuable about Stoicism is that it is very prescriptive. It just tells you, like, these are the things you should strive for, and these are the reasons why you should strive for it. I think it is actually very valuable and very misunderstood. Most people don't really understand what Stoicism actually is. So yeah, the video hopefully will help explain to you what Stoicism is, and maybe will convince you that it is of more practical use than you might have originally assumed. Yeah, I think one of the other problems with Epicureanism, which Stoicism does not have, is Epicureanism is very much it very much told people to retreat from political affairs. Same thing with the Cynics. They really didn't have a very politically active approach to problems at hand, whereas the Stoics were very active in a civic sense. I think that the Stoic philosophy is not about trying to escape the suffering of life. It's about learning to confront the suffering of life. And I think that is a very valuable approach, and that is absolutely what we're going to have to learn to do. So, yeah. Knowledge and Defense says, left comms I talked to argue that we have to wait until the next chance for a quote-unquote revolutionary wave period. Prefiguration can prepare for that, but this time exclude unprincipled opportunist parties. Yeah, this is unfortunately the first part. Maybe it's true. I guess we'll find out. The last part is just delusional. Like the idea that we can just exclude unprincipled opportunist parties as if we get to choose who is included or excluded. I mean, it'd be nice, for example, if we could exclude all of these authoritarian leftist parties, but I think we can already see in practice it's not really up to us whether those parties are involved in the process. I mean, PSL is growing, it's a very large, and it is just such an authoritarian party. I mean, all authoritarian leftist parties, or rather I should say that's pretty much all parties, are opportunist. Authoritarianism is inherently opportunist. It doesn't really have an underlying moral principle for action. There isn't really any limit to the Machiavellianism by which these parties act in a general sense. And you'll find that that's true in nearly every circumstance, and there are very few exceptions. And when hierarchical power structures get created, then it doesn't really matter what you want. What will happen is that the natural dynamics of the hierarchical power structure will actually determine who gets into positions of power and how power is distributed and what the outcomes are. So it seems to me that, I don't know, the exclusion of the opportunist parties just reminds me of the authoritarian leftists always trying to pretend that what we need is a different authoritarian leftist party. That, oh, if we just get the right authoritarians in power, if the hierarchical power structure is filled with people who have just the right ideas, that somehow everything is going to go right. And I just find this deeply naive, to be honest. So I don't know. Knowledge and Defense says, wait, but don't you advocate for doing that as well? I don't know which part you mean. Excluding the opportunist parties? I mean, I certainly want to exclude them from all of the organizing that I'm doing, and I certainly tried to exclude them from all of the prefiguration that we are constructing. He's laying out all the books. Come on, bro. Come on. No clause. No. But I think when I hear what you said, it sounds like what they're just saying is like they still want a party, they still want an authoritarian structure, but they just want to exclude specific opportunist parties. And I just don't believe that that's really feasible insofar. The cat. I don't think that's feasible insofar as you build a hierarchical power structure. You don't get to choose if the opportunist parties succeed or not. Instead, the hierarchical power structure will determine that those who are most Machiavellian are going to be the ones who succeed. So the key is not excluding the opportunist parties. Those parties... Stop it. Don't bite. You silly baby. The excluding the opportunist parties is not the key aspect. That no. Oh my gosh. He's being absolute goblin today. Okay. Now he's trying to knock something off. What do I do with this? Okay, it's going in my pocket. The key is you have to build, the majority of the front has to build horizontal power structures. Horizontal power structures are what will determine whether there is success in the movement or not. If the movement uses hierarchical power structures, it's already failed. Hierarchical power structures are counter-revolutionary. So that's really the key. The key is not excluding opportunist parties. You do that as much as possible, but it's not really possible in the strictest sense. They're going to be present. What you do instead, you build horizontal power structures such that anybody who wants to be involved has to be involved in a horizontal power structure. They're not allowed to build a hierarchical power structure that then dominates the movement. They're not then, that's what I'm trying to say, is that the key is not excluding those parties. You do that to the maximal degree possible. The key is you have to build horizontal power structures. And if you don't, if what is built is not a horizontal power structure, if the revolutionary movement doesn't create something that is horizontal, it has already failed. The process is over already. You can just give it a few years. It will just revert right back to a system of repression. So that's what I'm trying to get at. I missed a ton of messages in the meantime. Welcome to all the people who are showing up. Infinite Love, who has, I think, previously said that he doesn't believe in revolution, also says that libertarian socialists can and will also be Machiavellian, I think is what you're trying to say. Yeah, no, that's possible. All individuals can act in a Machiavellian way. The point is that when you create horizontal power structures, these are structures which are inherently constructed to fight back against those impulses. It's not about the individuals. Don't get me wrong. You want to cultivate good individuals. That's important. However, the structures are what prevent those individuals from doing damage. If you create a hierarchical power structure, then you are rewarding the most Machiavellian people. If you create a horizontal power structure, it is the hardest system for Machiavellian people to corrupt, because that's a system where they have to go to work actually convincing everybody to follow behind them. That's a system where they actually have to develop consent behind their hierarchical power. Whereas in a hierarchical power structure, all they have to do is get into the position of hierarchical power. And that they can often just bypass consent in that process, because most often those systems aren't really based in consent. They're based in compulsory hierarchy. You have to vote for somebody to be in that position of hierarchical power. And Machiavellian people who are corrupt and selfish, those sorts of people are really good at manipulating those hierarchical power structures, and it is much more difficult for them to manipulate horizontal power structures. Not Serial says, what do you think of council communists and libertarian Marxists? Honestly, I consider them allies. I organize with somebody who is a council communist, basically, and they are, for the most part, directly in line with a libertarian socialism that I would agree with. The problem with a lot of council communists, not the one I'm mentioning in particular, the problem with a lot of libertarian Marxists more broadly is that they are extremely polemic against anarchists, even though they basically are anarchists. That's kind of one of the most frustrating parts to me. But insofar as they could just stop doing that, That would be great. Maybe then we could form a, I guess you might call it a libertarian socialist front. But the real problem seems to be that they are too polemic against anarchists. Most anarchists I know are kind of just like, oh, council communists? Hell yeah. They're basically anarcho-syndicalists. But most council communists are like, anarchists? They're just radical liberals or something. They just say some stupid shit like that. And it's kind of tiring. If that were to cease, then I think that we would get along very well. I think they would find that we have far fewer divergences in our approaches and even in our analytical structures than they immediately believe. So that is my take. Not Serial says, how should anarchists view former state socialist countries? Are there nuances and good aspects? That is really complicated. There's just a lot to say about it. Yeah, it's very nuanced, and there are good aspects. It's certainly the case that, you know, state socialist, or rather I would call them state capitalist countries, are better than the situations that they came from in almost every occasion. You know, they're better than feudalism. They're better than colonialism. However, they are just another form of capitalism. State socialism isn't socialist, as I've seen a few other people mention. State socialism doesn't meet the basic criteria, which is that the workers own and operate the means of production. Instead, in state socialism, and I put that in scare quotes, the people who run the state, and that is to say, a small group of bureaucrats, a small group of elected bureaucrats, are the ones who own and operate the means of production. The state, instead of the workers, are the ones who actually own and operate, or own and control the means of production. And the workers instead are just commanded, just as they are in a typical capitalist orientation. So yeah, if you want to know my extensive opinions, you can go watch the series The State is Counter-Revolutionary, where I lay out not only the theory of the state and how anarchists view the state, but also I inspect two examples, that's the USSR and Maoist China, and demonstrate how the state was a saboteur to the success of those projects. It was not the guarantor of the success of those projects. So that's what I would instruct you to. Infinity Love says, when I read about Bakunin, I think he was pretty Machiavellian. I don't agree at all. I have no idea why you would say that. I just don't think there's any parallel there. Machiavellianism is how you approach the management of a hierarchical power structure, how you approach the rising through and management of a hierarchical power structure. Bakunin was in opposition to hierarchical power structures. Yeah, just reading through what people are saying here. As Wallach says, anarchism and other horizontal tendencies have been the only strategies to have actually produced workers' control over the means of production. Simple as. That's why I'm not a communist. Now, that last part, I think what you mean by that is that you're not an authoritarian leftist, and you're using this phrase communist to refer to these state communist experiments that we were just referring to. But I don't I don't concede that word to them. Communist does not mean when the state does stuff. Communist is when there is complete decommodification of the economy, the abolition of the wage-labor relation, and where all distribution is from each according to their ability to each according to their need. It is a stateless, classless, moneyless society. So by definition, all of those examples of state, quote-unquote, socialist economies, these are not communist. In fact, they are the antithesis to communist. They were to communism. These were states. These were societies that had states, classes, and money, and where distribution was not from each according to their ability to each according to their need, but instead through internal market dynamics in nearly every occasion. So no, absolutely, I wouldn't call them communist, but I still get the vibe of what you're saying. Alexander Smith Burden says, would love a video on Sudanese and other area of conflict anarchism. So the thing is that I've very studiously avoided talking about current events on the channel. And there's a few big reasons for that. It's not because I don't think those things are important. It's because, number one, as soon as I talk about current events, that could subsume the entire channel. Current events is literally something you could just produce videos about nonstop all day long and still not keep up with the news. Number two, it means that I would have to be constantly reading the news. I would have to be constantly up to date on everything that's taking place. I would have to have an opinion on all of those things. And that is an enormous mental burden. I don't think that that would be a good use of my time. And it's not to say that those things aren't important, but it is to say that I think that there are other people who are already doing that work that I think are doing a very good job. So I've been avoiding talking about current events in a broad sense. There's maybe one or two examples to the contrary you can find on the channel, but in a general sense, I've avoided it. That's not to say that I may not change that in the future, but I'm still not in the mindset that I want to change it at the moment. Another reason is that I don't want to have to be required to talk about all of those events that are taking place. As soon as I start covering current events, then the dam opens and everybody's going to be asking me to comment on every single event. And I personally just don't want that to be the direction that the channel goes. I instead would prefer the channel remain focused on political theory and philosophy and praxis, and only have some minor divergences into history when it is required. But I understand why people do want me to talk about current events. Obviously, there are all kinds of things taking place all over the world that are incredibly important and devastating, and for which people would like me to show solidarity with those events. That's understandable completely. And the thing is that usually if I make that commentary, it's here on the live stream. And that's because here on the live stream, it's not taking up air on the rest of the channel, which I want to be about philosophy, political theory, and practice. So I'm definitely in a time right now for the channel where I'm trying to determine what the future of the channel is going to be, and I'm trying to determine, the direction that I want the channel to go in total. So it's not as if it's impossible that I would begin talking about current events, but still at the moment, I'm thinking that is not the direction I want to take the channel. Kristen Supine says, I have anarchist friends who cannot disassociate communism from Marxist-Leninism, and it's really frustrating because their system literally is anarcho-communism with zero changes whatsoever. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree, and that's frustrating to me too, but I also understand why people have that inclination, especially given, like, you can see what people are saying here in the chat, you know, like that it's essentially been stolen to such a degree that nobody associates communism with its actual meaning anymore. To them, communism means literally the exact opposite of what it is. Like, the authoritarian leftists succeeded in destroying the meaning of the word by and large to the majority of people. Like, communism is supposed to be stateless, classless, and moneyless, and now somehow it's come to mean a hyper-authoritarian state which still has classes and money. It is a devastating loss in that sense. But it's the only way that I use that word is when it's among people who understand that I'm using it in its actual scholarly sense, in its traditional revolutionary sense, what people actually fought for, not what was instituted and what propaganda made the word mean afterwards. But I would say that is not the word you want to use with most normal people. Saying that you're a communist, they immediately think what you want is a hyper-authoritarian state that has strict class delineations and all of that. So it actually works against conveying what you mean to the average person in a lot of occasions. However, it's annoying when somebody who is versed in theory and is a revolutionary leftist misuses the word in just that sort of colloquial sense. I do find that frustrating. Infinite Love says, I mean, like, he really was like, I have to get my goals through at all costs, even if it will be destructive. Well, not at all costs. Bakunin was an anarchist, so he didn't believe that you could use hierarchical power structures to bring about an anarchist society. Bakunin believed in means-ends unity, so he believed that we had to create structures by which the workers controlled the means of production directly, not through intermediaries and not through hierarchical power structures. So I disagree with the characterization that Bakunin said that at all costs. He was now, as for what he was talking about with destruction, that is an acceptable cost insofar as that we are creating a society where the workers control the means of production. It's not in contrary to means ends unity for the masses to be capable of destroying their enemies. In fact, that's kind of a component of self-defense. The capability to defend yourself is the capability to do harm. So Bakunin wasn't saying at all costs. He was just saying that destroying the existing system was absolutely necessary. Long Defiant says, so many of our academic terms are poisoned. Very frustrating. Yeah, agreed completely. You know, so much of the time when I'm just talking with the average person, I just use whatever words I think they're going to understand. I'm really not very discerning about using some like really specific word and then demanding they use it the same way as me. I've done that before, and like it can work if you have a long time to educate them about what you mean about it. But a lot of people are going to see that as somehow being deceitful, even though it's not. It's the opposite. It's you just being really honest. But instead, they're going to see it as you like trying to do like a propaganda campaign, because it goes so contrary to their intuitions about what those words mean. They think you're the one deceiving them when you teach them about what the words actually mean. So instead, I try to use words that just convey to people what I actually mean. So like a lot of the time, I will say that what I want is, you know, federations of directly democratic councils that make decisions through a deliberative process. Oh my gosh. Why'd you do that? Don't do that. You just want to cause chaos today, huh? Why do you want to cause chaos? You trying to get me to clean your litter box? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? See, if you buy one of these copies of A Modern Anarchism, you get to know that Lorenzo laid all over it. Isn't that like pretty sweet? I mean, maybe you should have to pay extra for these. Not really, but these are christened by Lorenzo here. I might clean his litter box here in a second because I heard him over there in the litter box making upset noises. So maybe that's why he's being such a little chaos demon today. Yeah, every cat is an anarchist. Every cat is an anarchist. Okay, baby, I'm gonna clean it. Okay, let's see. Do I have... All right, I'll clean it. Give me a sec. All right, I have returned. It's crazy. You step away from the stream for just a minute or two, and your watchers just plummet. Incredible, good stuff. Anyway, I am back. So, reading back over what y'all said. Jack Botsford says, anarchists need a new word, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I would have to agree, but it's been difficult to find that word. Another problem is that every time we retreat from a word, they're just going to demonize a new word, you know? I don't really know what word would even do the job at this point. Anarchism is straight to the point. It's opposition to hierarchy. That's what it means. But yeah, it's a challenge. I just explain my politics to people. And then once I've kind of gotten some agreement on it, I explain to them that's what anarchism is. Anti-hierarchism, true democracy, communalism. Yeah, I mean, maybe communalism is close enough to communism that I don't think it would last very long. I don't think that it would last very long as one that you know, wasn't propagandized. I think that they would pick out its relation to broader leftist ideas very quickly. But yeah, no, I mean, I've used the word communalism before. Cooperation Tulsa describes itself as communalist, and I think that has been generally very effective because it doesn't have all of those negative connotations. So communityism. Yeah. Infinite Love says, to what degree will there be markets in your system, Anark? Markets are only for transition. That is to say, during the period of time that you have to exist within a hierarchical world where the world is hierarchical and markets exist, then you will have to have internal markets by which to evaluate your products and then offer them to an external market. So there will be a market in transition. However, we are hoping to abolish hierarchical power more broadly. And in that sense, maintaining, insofar as we can maintain democratic control horizontally, then we would like to see market abolition ultimately. But I think that that only comes after that you have eliminated the grip of hierarchical power across the planet, then market abolition will become feasible. In the meantime, you want to domestically abolish the market for all goods that are necessities, and you don't want to be trading those on the market. So you don't want to be trading on the market things like food, water, housing, healthcare. These are things that you want to maintain their decommodified status internally, and that's really because those things you don't want to be perverted by market incentives. Instead, you want those things to be provided to people free of charge. And you also shouldn't be trading them on global markets because we've already seen how disastrously that, for example, having planning, but trading things like food on global markets went in places like China or the USSR, requisitioning enormous amounts of grain and then selling it to foreigners in order to make money, and that was terrible. It actually exacerbated their famines. So that's certainly not something that we want. However, if you would like to see the kind of general model that I would advocate for that transition period where we have to coexist in a world where hierarchical power still exists, you should go watch my video after the revolution or read the essay if you prefer. So yeah, still catching up. Somebody said we should call it super democracy. You know, I thought about the word that, I thought about you trying to use the word democracy somehow. And I thought of maybe the word like democratarian, for example, because, you know, it's not Democrat, obviously. But I think 2 words is probably too much. Super democracy or super Democrats, not good. Anything that involves Democrats, probably not a good idea. Democratic confederalism, well, that's a very specific praxis. It's not one that could be generalized to all of anarchism, even though it's very anarchistic, very anarchic. Unfortunately, I don't think that it's probably a good idea to just call the whole movement Democratic Confederalist. Councilism is interesting, directly related to sort of council communism. Councilism, I kind of like it. I thought maybe just horizontalists. Just call ourselves horizontalists. It also, what I like about it is it advocates what we want. Horizontalism. It doesn't say what we don't want, which is what anarchism does. Anarchy, not hierarchy. Horizontalism says what we want. Horizontalism. I think that's helpful because a lot of people hear anarchy or opposition to hierarchical power, and they think what that means is no organization. But when you use the word horizontalist, you're emphasizing, no, we do want organization, a particular kind of organization. So I think that's helpful. Horizontalism is too many syllables? Maybe, I guess. That's possible. Anti-authoritarian. Yeah, anti-authoritarianism. Indira says, anti-authoritarian can summarize anarchism in a favorable way. It's too broad to be a formal name, though. I think that's the problem. A lot of people would consider themselves anti-authoritarian who really are not our allies for, you know, anarcho-capitalists, for example. Yeah, I like, that's like Thurna says, right? Like the definition should embody what we are about the most. That's why I like horizontalism or horizontalist. That's why I think it's probably like the most effective word you could use in a broader sense. Social, excuse me, social anti-authoritarian. It's too long, too many words. I mean, it gets the point across. And maybe in a particular colloquial sense, it might be useful. But, you know, insofar as we're looking for a word the movement can use that is catchy and might actually catch on, I don't think that will be the one. Yeah, horizontalism means we want a replacement to hierarchy. It's exactly right. I think that would be helpful. This is productive right now. We're actually brainstorming together, everyone. You like this? I like it. Saqib says, bringing back an old one, Federalists. That is exactly what anarchists called themselves at the beginning, Federalists, which is probably deeply confusing for a lot of people in the modern day because federalism is associated with having layers of government, but the top one being the most supreme. So a lot of people are very confused when they think federalism, they think of the American system of government, which is not good, but yeah. Thurna nailed it here. Super democratarian, communalist, horizontal, anarchic communism. Nailed it. That's going to be what it is. That's going to be the one. Yeah, like Hadrian says, the problem is that most people think they are anti-authoritarian, even if they aren't. For example, liberals and conservatives. Yeah, it's exactly right. That's really the issue, in my opinion. Confederalists won't confuse the Americans, I promise. Yeah, that's another thing. Confederalism. In fact, there was a period of time where I was trying to build the Confederation here in Tulsa, and I kept bringing this word Confederation to people who were marginalized, Latina people and black people and so on. And they really did not like the word Confederalist. And I kept explaining, I was like, well, it's not like, Confederates, like the Confederation. It's the word is being misused by them. The word is not, they're like, even if you're right, that doesn't matter. People aren't going to like it. You're not going to get marginalized people to use the word confederalism in a way that you like. And so, yeah, I mean, words are important. They definitely can confuse people or turn people off. And that word confederalism or confederation, as well as federation, these can be very confusing to people and definitely lead them in the opposite direction from understanding what we're actually saying. Knowledge and Defense says anarcho-communists equal horizontalist decommodifiers. See, now you're on the right track. I kind of like that. Horizontalist decommodification. Yeah, there we go. There we go. It gets straight to the point about what we actually want. And I think you're definitely picking up on the lesson that I'm trying to teach right now, which is that we need to be saying what we want rather than just what we don't want. And that's a perfect example. Unfortunately, 2 words too much, but horizontalist at least is a good starting point. And then saying horizontalist decommodifier might be a good way to kind of get the point across. But yeah. Saqib says, if they don't like confederalism, we will call it pro-federalism. Nailed it. Nailed it. So somebody said, can you pursue, not Serial says, can one pursue a career in law and also be an anarchist? Yeah, I think so. I think that it's fine. It's your job, right? It's like asking whether you can have a job in a factory and be an anarchist. I mean, yeah, you're engaging in a hierarchical power structure, but you are not the person who is reproducing the hierarchical power structure. I think that maybe it gets a little more sketchy when you ask about being a judge and being an anarchist. You can't be a cop and be an anarchist. These are positions which reproduce and reinforce the hierarchical system. I think that being a public defender, for example, I think somebody actually mentioned that down below. Being a public defender is a good example of how you can use a law degree and still be an anarchist. And as somebody says, there's a lot of anarchists. There's a lot of lawyers that are anarchists. But it's important that you are aware of your position in the system and ask yourself whether it's consistent with anarchist praxis. And I think that there are positions for people who have law degrees, people who have a knowledge of the system, lawyers, I guess would be way easier to say, to be anarchists. Adrian says, so is being a Blackwater mercenary off the table, or is it still up in the air? I would say that the things that you were being forced to do as a mercenary are probably in a general sense going to be so treacherous that I don't see how it could be consistent with anarchist praxis. The Gooberator, says horizontalism is probably the best mass term, but anarcho-communism is the most accurate label for those specific social anarchists. Agreed 100%. That's exactly correct. So, to some degree, it's really just trying to figure out how you convey yourself to people for which propaganda has poisoned their understanding of what these words mean. Let's see if my student has gotten back to me. Mutual aiders, somebody says. I don't think he gets enough across. Prod Arcsign says, why can't we just be anarchist? Why does it need a prefix? You can. That's what I call myself. I just call myself an anarchist. I just specify more generally, or I specify more specifically based on the person I'm talking to. Depends on the context. Help fellow manism. The friendly neighborhood horizontalist. That's exactly right. On one of my social media accounts, I actually have your friendly neighborhood anarchist on there. Yeah, Knowledge and Defense says autonomism is Marxist, though. Yeah, exactly. Autonomism. Well, you know, there is Marxist autonomism, but I think autonomism more broadly. I don't know if autonomism is. Let's find out. Autonomism. Yeah, also known as autonomous Marxism. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it is Marxist by nature. Interesting. Yeah, Hadrian says, horizontalist is the best mass term, in my opinion, because it invites a discourse. That's exactly what I think as well. Horzos. Somebody said horzos. I don't know about that one. I don't know about that one. So it's interesting, this word horizontalism, the first time I ever heard it was there was a Spanish movement called horizontalismo. And I think that literally just means horizontalism in Spanish. And yeah, this is something that occurred in Spain. Damn horzos are at it again. Saqib says, sounds like an insult. Masuda Trent, damn horzos are at it again. That's exactly right. We're going to be called horzos. I'm in it just for the horzos. Eve says, thoughts on insurrectionary and post-leftist anarchism? I am neither. I'll just say that. So obviously I don't agree with everything they have to say. Post-leftist anarchism is kind of annoying to me because so much of the arguments that they have are semantic arguments. Like they basically say leftism is a bad grouping because it groups us in with people we disagree with. But it's like, I got bad news for you. Every grouping groups you in with people you disagree with. Like, I'm an anarchist and, you know, I've met plenty of anarchists I disagree with. You know, I could say that, you know, I'm a communist and there are lots of communists I disagree with. So I don't really agree with most post-leftism. I think that a lot of the time it's very much just kind of this academic sort of approach. It's very lost in the land of ideas. It doesn't seem like it has much of practical use to say. Insurrectionary anarchism is more interesting. It has a long history. It goes all the way back to Cafiero. If I had to try to put a specific origination point to it. And I think there are some values to insurrectionary anarchism, but I think that insurrectionary anarchists often get way too caught up in combating the enemy. And that's not to say that that's not something we should do. And I would say that there is a constructive and a destructive aspect of anarchism. And they spend too much time on the destructive aspect and not enough time on the constructive aspect. And I'm more the sort that I think that we have to spend a little bit more time on the constructive aspect. And the destructive aspect comes as a byproduct of us focusing on construction. To be fair, obviously, they both have to be present. You have to be in conflict with the system as it is, but you also have to be building something at the same time. But I think that in my experience and from what I've read, insurrectionary anarchists are a little too focused on the combat portion. Infinite Love says, is not that postmodernist either? No, post-anarchism is about postmodernism. This is a really confusing part of it. Post-leftism is saying that it is post-leftism. It's like after leftism. Post-anarchism is not saying it's after anarchism. It's anarchism with postmodernism, postmodernist philosophy mixed into it. This is, a lot of people get that one mixed up. Myself included when I first heard them. Geki asks, hey, Anark, what are we discussing today? Honestly, we've been spending a lot of this stream talking about what kind of words that we might use to describe anarchism and communism that are not deeply propagandized words. Like words that haven't been literally, people haven't been made to think that they think the literal exact opposite of what they mean. Oh, God. Saqib Ahmed says, the right keeps stealing our names. I think we should steal from them too. Objectivism, anyone? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think maybe there's a philosophical position that you could use objectivism for, but I don't think it's going to do us much good. Flinner says, Anark, would you say fascism is a middle-class movement? I'm not saying there aren't poor people who are reactionary, but most far-right people I've met throughout my life are fairly middle-class. I mean, this is the classical conception, is that fascism is a movement of the petite bourgeois. And I think that there is a lot of validity to it, for sure. I mean, this is certainly something you'll see, is that the petite bourgeois are the most likely to side with the fascists. And there's a few different reasons for that. One is that when you're the petite bourgeois, you feel precarious. You feel like you're like right in this position where you could fall back into being the proletariat at any time. And so you're actually really afraid of things changing in society. So that's part of it. I also think that being petite bourgeois gives you a little bit of a taste of power, but not a lot of a taste of power, right? It usually puts you in a position where you either have more wealth than most people you know, or at least you are bossing people around. You own a business and you're the boss of, 5, 10, 20 people or something. But you're not so powerful that you can really change the scope of society. So you always have this aspirational sense to your class consciousness. Your class consciousness is kind of like this dual recognition that if things go a little bit wrong, you could fall back into the proletariat. And if things go a little bit right, maybe you can end up being one of the administrators of this hierarchical system of domination. And I think that a lot of the sort of people who want to be petite bourgeois are also the sort of people that wish they were dictators. They wish they were the ones commanding everybody around. They think that they're fit for it. And I think that that is sort of in a feedback loop, where those are the sorts of people who aspire to, be like a used car salesman or own a used car lot, I should say, are the sorts of people who already think that they deserve to boss other people around. But also, the longer you spend in that position, the more that you think you're worthy of being the sort of person to boss other people around. So you have this, like I said, like there's like a dual aspect to your class consciousness when you're petite bourgeois. Like one is like fear of falling back into the proletariat, and the other one is this sort of aspiration to being a dominator, to being a billionaire, even though you never ever will. So you always have this sort of You have this resentment inside of you that you're being held back from achieving your rightful position as a billionaire. And it's really just all, and so it's easy to point your mind towards a bunch of scapegoats, oh, it's all just them trannies that are doing it. It's all them, black people. It's all the Hispanics, it's easy to get your mind into that mindset. Also, sorry for using the first word. I understand it usually is generally considered a slur, so I apologize ahead of time. But, this is the mindset of somebody who is in the petite bourgeois. That's, what I'm trying to help you think of here is, these scapegoats are easy to give them an understanding of why they're not in the position to dominate everybody. And, they need somebody to blame it on. And so it's easy to get them angry. And they have enough money also that they can spend on some militaristic hobby. So they're also very likely to enter into militias, enter into positions of violence, to join these sort of hate movements, and to become powerful, to enter into positions of power within those hate movements as well. So what you'll find is that the majority of people who are in a hate movement aren't petite bourgeois. Like the majority of them are probably like a lower class, and many of them are like in poverty. But the people who are at the head of those hate movements, the people who are powerful within them, are often like petite bourgeois, or even related to the bourgeois in some sense, but are like disgraced bourgeois. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I essentially agree with your assessment there, but I do think it's complicated, of course. A movement that were just the petite bourgeois would never be able to do anything. It wouldn't be revolutionary. The petite bourgeois, however, are always significant figures within every fascist movement. So I missed a bunch of comments while I was rambling. Knowledge and Defense says, what do you think about this response to your class as the primary contradiction counter? Bigotry still stems from divide and conquer propaganda by the ruling class due to economic incentives. I think the way I look at it is hierarchical power is a holistic system of domination. That class, which is to say economic delineations, are very operative because they accumulate a huge amount of power, because money and the operation and distribution of, or the operation of the means of production and the distribution of economic plenty, or the of goods and services, is a very powerful way to control people's lives. Maybe the most powerful. It's like the state and capitalism are among the most powerful, right? However, I think the problem is that when you don't have this holistic mindset, you don't recognize that each of these hierarchical structures have their own internal incentives for functioning, right? So like, for example, gerontocracy, which is, say, the rule of old people, that predates capitalism, and it predates large-scale economic accumulation. And it was, in fact, a damaging hierarchy in many of those examples. It actually led to this sort of warlike orientation in a lot of examples. So it's not that the economic incentives by themselves are what produce all of the hierarchical structures and the delineations between people's identities and the scapegoating. But it is the case that economic power is one of the most primary forms of power, and certainly gives one of the largest accumulations of power the fastest if they can succeed at that game. But I think it's really important to understand that it's not just economic power and everything roots from that. Economic power, it's more like a bunch of Venn diagrams, right? Where you have like a bunch of overlapping circles, and the overlap of all of them is the hierarchy, right? And so I don't think that there will ever be a good argument for an economic reductionism, but I do think
that sometimes what a mistake people can make is in discounting the power of economics in transforming the structure of society. And when people leave class out of the conversation, they've essentially left out one of the most major contributing factors to how that hierarchical power structures in society are actually structured and what the means of the circulation of power is in a society such as ours. Okay. Masuda Trent says, I'm also curious if you'll continue the Liberation in Action series anytime soon. Possibly, but at the moment, I'm not planning to make more of them at this exact moment. It's not to say that they may not happen in the future, but that's not where my mind is currently at. For me, doing the sort of like detail-oriented stuff about historical projects and about existing projects, that is a lot of scholarly effort that at the moment, I don't feel like I have the time to give. I'm trying to give most of that scholarly effort to the production of my bigger video essays. The Liberation in Action series, however, I should probably be trying to brew some of those up on the side. But at the moment, I'm trying I've spread too wide. I have too many projects that are happening all at the same time. I need to start knocking out, a bunch of smaller projects that I've already started. And once I get those out of the way, maybe that'll free up a little more bandwidth for me to go back to something like Liberation in Action. But at the moment, not planning on it. But long term, possibly. Geki says, what about Anark responds, but you respond to Liberation in Action comments? I'd imagine Zapatistas and Rojava would have a lot of tanky comments. Yeah, I mean, Anark responds, those are pretty low effort, so I would definitely consider doing those again. But I also think that I got a lot of the wildest comments on my videos were in the ones I already did. I would definitely be open to doing more of them in the future, however. Kristen Supine says, do you think there are lessons or philosophies we can learn or adopt from the Zapatistas? I see them as being one of the most successful and inspiring projects as of late. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've learned an enormous amount from the Zapatistas. The Zapatistas, I think one of the most important things that I have learned from the Zapatistas is that not being super dogmatic about the words with average people. Because when something is going to span wide, it's going to have to appeal to people without being doctrinaire about the usage of specific words. And it's also going to have to appeal to their already held sort of philosophical commitments. And you're also, I think another important part about it, going to have to organize people together with whom you disagree, and that the basis by which that you can organize with those people you disagree is such that you agree to the structures that will mediate your decisions. That is to say that you agree that we're all going to come together in these horizontal power structures, and that is going to be the means by which we can cooperate. Even if we don't agree outside of that, even if that there's, a lot of antagonism antagonism, but these horizontal power structures are places we can come together and make decisions together regardless of those disagreements. I think that's something the Zapatistas have really clearly demonstrated to me, is that once you've got the horizontal power structure set up, once they've become sort of hegemonic in your region, then pluralism becomes functional again. But in the meantime, I don't think pluralism is super functional, because when you're embryonic, you cannot have a bunch of corruption from hierarchical power structures involved in the development of your project. It's only once your project has become the cultural default, the cultural norm, that then pluralism becomes acceptable, because then that is a position wherein we can all come together. We can agree on the default of horizontalism. So, got a donation from Son Pear, and I probably just massacred that, for $5. He says, "Hey there, just a little gift to say thanks for your work." No, I appreciate you. Thank you. Things just like this is the reason why I get to continue doing my work. If I weren't able to make a living from this channel, it'd be way more difficult to write theory and probably to get published and all of that. So I appreciate all of you who donate to the channel, all of you who are patrons to the channel. All of that is enormously, enormously helpful in me continuing to develop anarchist theory and to write these big essays, and also to have time to do praxis. And, part of the reason why I still have to tutor is that the channel still doesn't quite make enough for me to live on. It's kind of like it's in this middle zone, right? Where it's kind of like, oh, well, I wouldn't starve if I just relied on it, but I would have to live like by the dollar. So I have to pick up odd jobs on the side in order to kind of like have enough money to actually not live luxuriously, but to live even somewhat comfortably. So, when y'all give money to the channel, when y'all become patrons, that is moving me more and more towards self-sufficiency of the channel. And I got to say right now, I've been very discouraged because my metrics have been looking really bad. And I understand that's kind of a cross YouTube thing. Even really big channels with millions of subscribers, I've seen some of them make videos about how their metrics just got destroyed. I've seen people whose channels that have nothing to do with politics, people who are like doing gaming content or something, talk about how they are kind of like scared and that these are difficult times, and they're trying to figure out how to change their channel such that they can bring in views, get ad revenue, etc., because everybody's taken such a big hit recently. It looks like what probably has happened is that YouTube changed the way it was calculating the views, and it changed the way the algorithm was oriented, and that has really devastated a lot of channels. My channel, for example, is getting so many fewer subscribers than it was this time last year. This time last year, when all I had to do was just consistently make videos, just release a video like every week or something, and I would be getting like between 500 to 1,000 subscribers a month. This year, I do the same thing, and I'm getting like 200 subscribers a month. So I'm at like a fifth of what I would have been gaining, the rate at which I would have been gaining subscribers. So yeah, whatever YouTube did to the algorithm has been really disruptive to people who are running YouTube channels. Do you tutor in person or online? I tutor in person. Beastie Beats donated $5. I appreciate you. They said, here in Romandi? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll look that up in a minute. I'm not sure. I am not familiar with that. We've got plenty of people who call themselves libertarian who are basically anarchists. How about we take back that word? No, libertarian is one that probably could be taken back, but people get really confused about it. Depending on where you are on Earth, that word libertarian could be a word that is still associated with anarchism, or it could be a word that's associated with American libertarians. So it's like really hit or miss on whether that word is useful to use in talking to the average person. Romandi. Okay. Oh, it's a French-speaking region of Switzerland. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Wasn't familiar with that. Yeah, Romandie is in Switzerland. Huh. Blight327 says, I've been looking for more modern ML theory, not unlike what you or Andrew do. Do you know of any? Well, I assume what you mean is like ML theory kind of being produced in this new way where we do it in video essays and stuff. I'm actually not familiar of anybody trying to create new theory in those Marxist-Leninist spaces. They tend to be very doctrinaire. They don't tend to develop very much. And when they develop, or when somebody tries to develop something new in those spaces, they are sort of torn down as not following the immortal science of Marxist-Leninism. So if that exists, I'm not really familiar with it. Yeah, I think that their theoretical constructs sort of prevent them from taking those sorts of risks and creating something new. FIFA Fern says, there's so much negativity everywhere on news and YouTube and so on. It would be so great if the current positive stuff was highlighted more, like unity and cooperation and collectives. Liberation and action is a place for that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I will say that even before I took a big hit on YouTube, those videos did worse than most of my videos. And I think the sad truth is that a lot of the reason why that the outrage content and the negative stuff does so well is that, truthfully, people aren't clicking on the positive stuff as much. People are very driven by that outrage stuff. They're very driven by this sort of, I don't know, the fear, I guess the adrenaline of the terror. I don't know. It's a sort of perverse feeling of looking into the abyss and being thrilled by it. But maybe people have changed since things have gotten quite a bit worse in the meantime, and maybe those videos would do better now. But yeah, it's also fine. I wouldn't make my decisions just based on that, but it is to say that, you know, even before the YouTube algorithm changed, those videos weren't doing nearly as well as my more critical videos. Knowledge and Defense says, Anark, have you checked out any of Bad Mouse's recent videos against Stalinists? He released a new one about the Hungarian Revolution just now. Yeah, I've been keeping up with pretty much all the videos he's releasing. I don't think I've watched that one just quite yet, but they've been really good, and the production quality has been fantastic. But yeah, no, Bad Mouse has definitely made a pivot. He started as an anarchist, kind of as a baby anarchist, and then he pivoted to being essentially, I think, like, I mean, maybe I'm mistaken, but like a Trotskyist or something. And then he pivoted back to anarchism. And the videos since he's pivoted back to anarchism have been excellent, to be honest. Eve says, do you completely disassociate from MLs, or do you work with them strategically? I think the important thing about when you work with other tendencies is the place that you're working with them. You should not be working with them in horizontal organizations. They shouldn't even be in your horizontal organizations. However, in the social movement, that is to say, when these sort of organic organizations that have lots of different tendencies in them come together, then yeah, you should absolutely be willing to work with them in those contexts, because those aren't contexts where not only can you kick them out, but really you shouldn't kick them out. Those places are places where there is just going to be a lot of different people of a lot of different tendencies. And if you don't approach those places with the preconception that they will be pluralistic, that they will have many different kinds of people within them, then you're not going to succeed, and you're going to be a bad organizer. And what you're really going to end up doing is causing a lot of tension and drama that will probably split those coalitions apart and therefore make the people weaker in the process. So if you are, you know, organizing something, some big thing that's involved in the movement, and they're present, work with them. But in your organizations, they shouldn't be in horizontal organizations. Also, I would not federate with them. So if you're making a federation of horizontal organizations, do not federate with hierarchical organizations. Be right back. All right, I am back. Oh, hey, look at that. I walked away for a few seconds and the stream did not lose all of its viewers. Impressive. Good stuff. So, I don't know how to say this person's name. Sion Verfing. That was my best try. I'm sorry. They say a lot of MLs eventually learn of anarchist thought later on and then often skew over to that ideology. Yeah, I think it really depends. The people who are really deep in the cult, it's hard to say. They could go any which way. But the people who never really got deep into it, they're baby leftists, they identified with the Marxist-Leninism because it's just like what their friends were into or just what the particular echo chamber they wandered into was. Those people usually don't stay Marxist-Leninists because it's really not a very feasible ideology for the era that we're in. And the more you learn, the more you start slowly realizing that the praxis that anarchists are doing is actually the correct praxis if you are living in a capitalist country, in an already industrialized country. They start to kind of organically come to understand an anarchist praxis. And then when they start to read anarchism and they read anarchist theory, then they understand that the anarchists were right all along and they become anarchists as time goes on. So that's why I try not to be super judgmental when I meet somebody who is like young and describes themselves as a Marxist-Leninist, because most often they don't really have a good enough grasp of all of the theory to understand the grounding of their Marxist-Leninism and to really truly like compare and contrast their Marxist-Leninism to anarchism in a meaningful way. All they really know in a general sense is just kind of like whatever their echo chamber tells them. And so because their echo chamber prepares them poorly for engaging with anarchism, then they are also then going to be unprepared to deal with the arguments of the anarchists as they actually are, and not as they had been prepared for the anarchists to be by the sort of a straw man and low-grade polemic that is normalized in the Marxist-Leninist spaces. Casey Wiener says, do you have suggested changes or preemptive action for mutual aid food distribution with the impending end of SNAP in the so-called U.S.? I think there are all kinds of different approaches you could take. Right now, I know that there are a lot of organizations, a lot of nonprofits that are trying to develop those alternatives as we speak and are trying to set up all kinds of forms of direct distribution. Food banks are definitely increasing their capacity. But in a general sense, I think the preparatory factor for us as horizontalists, that's our new word, I think, as horizontalists, we should be prefiguring actual growing food. We should actually be learning how to grow food. And we should be trying to become good at growing food that people actually want to eat, and then finding ways to provide that food to people, either through direct distribution or through workers' cooperatives, whatever is most feasible in your area. But I think it's really important that we begin learning how to produce food rather than just continuing to rely on those agencies. But in a pinch, you should probably try to develop supply chains with groups that have overages, that have too much food, that don't know what to do with it. You should try to develop things like food not bombs. These are all good examples of how to deal with the current moment. If you're just talking about long-term planning, however, once again, we should be trying to figure out how to farm in urban areas. We should be trying to figure out how to farm in rural areas. I mean, SNAP is used by a lot of people in rural areas. So we also need to be growing food in those rural areas. It's a lot easier in a rural place. But we also need to be doing it in urban and suburban areas. In suburban areas, I think one of the best ways to produce a lot of food is probably just to network a bunch of backyard gardens together. Get them all networked together, get them growing, whatever you need, have a bunch of them growing what you need, and then keep track like, oh, we've already got like 50 backyards growing tomatoes. Can we start getting some people growing whatever, parsley or onions or whatever it might be? Like that kind of stuff is definitely what it looks like to do the long-term planning. And the short-term planning, once again, is the sort of harm reduction stuff that I discussed to begin with. RRRR says, is there an independent art scene in Tulsa, a project space or scene? Oh yeah, no, we have a flourishing art scene here in Tulsa. Tulsa's counterculture and its art culture is incredibly well developed in a way that nobody would expect from the outside. It's part of the reason why that we are able to organize like we are. It is so well developed. Eldritch Dwarf says, hey, Anark, when does one consider oneself ready for intermediate level of theory? I've been following you for a couple of months, and I'm going to a local anarchist bookstore to purchase books tomorrow. Honestly, you should just do it whenever you want to do it. That's the way I look at it. I don't think you should have to read basic theory, then intermediate, then advanced. I think that you should read whatever interests you. If you can just dive straight into advanced theory or intermediate theory or whatever, and that works and you're learning from it, you should just do it. Don't psych yourself out. Just learn about whatever you want to learn about. Just read whatever you want to read. And if it works, it works. It's that simple. I don't think that you have to progress through the stages. I think that it's going to be more about do you have the motivation to learn that theory if it's a challenge? If it's a challenge, then yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a challenge even when you do know a bunch of foundations. So don't even take it being a challenge as meaning you're not ready for it, because a lot of the time, even when you are ready for it, it's going to be a challenge. A lot of philosophy students run into this. So I would say just read whatever interests you, and that should be your guiding light. Somebody said cat. Yeah, Lorenzo is just did a long, sad meow for no reason that I can imagine. Sun Pear says, and folks, don't underestimate how many veggies can be produced on balconies in high density areas. Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's like people just need to be a little more proactive in trying to think of how to grow food. You can grow food indoors and like grow tents if you want to. If you've got enough room, do a grow tent and just buy lights and so on. Yeah, no, it's really just, if there's a will, there's a way. Victorious Gardenosaurus says, I reckon there's roughly 60 to 100 acres of green space in the average single family residential zoned square mile. Most of that is lawns. Yes, precisely the case. That's why I'm advocating the backyard gardens. You know, front yard would be great, but so many people have like homeowners associations and stuff that would make that impossible. But, you know, yeah, backyard gardens are a great way to go. If they don't have an HOA, then front yard gardens are also great. Just use those lawns for something productive. There's no reason to just have like just a Bermuda grass or whatever. Sion Verfing says, I have a lot of ML friends who have had negative personal experiences with anarchists and therefore have a preconceived notion of how we are as a group and thus do not do their research. Yeah, I'm sure that happens. Also, sometimes I wonder if their negative experience is just that they got into an argument with them. But yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you know, I know that there's a significant number of anarchists who are not very principled and don't really have a good understanding of how social transformation takes place. Some of them don't even care about social transformation. They only care about just having a radical lifestyle and dressing radical and all of that. And yeah, that could definitely give people negative experiences, but I think it's important to kind of educate people who've had that, you know, giving them the discernment between a social anarchist and an individualist anarchist is usually a good way to go. Kind of talking about organizationalism and anti-organizationalism. That's a good approach. Victorious Gardenosaurus says, if only enough gardeners could infiltrate the HOAs. I mean, that's totally possible, honestly. In fact, that might be a good angle to go in if you're in a neighborhood where the HOAs are going to disallow them from doing that. Is just get a bunch of gardeners in the neighborhood, just start attending the HOA meetings and to overwhelm the NIMBYs. And in that sense, actually just could take control of the HOAs. In fact, I've talked with people before about how it's like, okay, so like the HOAs usually are controlled by a very small number of the total people in the neighborhood. Like, what if we just like absolutely overwhelmed them with a tide of people who disagree and just like brought like, you know, if there's like 4 people in the HOA, just get like 40 people in the neighborhood to join the HOA and just absolutely blow out the 4 people who are making those bad decisions. And that seems like kind of a good approach if you're trying to fix the problems that HOAs are causing in the neighborhood. Tommy Sanders says, would you ever ask Robert Evans if you could go on his podcast? So far, I have not asked any podcast that I've gone on whether I could go on the podcast. I've been invited by every show I have been on thus far. However, when I am doing promotion next year, when Modern Anarchism, the full text by PM Press is released, I'll probably try to go on a bunch of different shows and promote the book. And so I might reach out to a bunch of different shows that I've never gone on before. But thus far, I've never reached out to anybody to do any of the appearances that I've done. So if you want me to go on a given show, then you should reach out to those people and ask them to invite me on, because that's the most effective way. So I've got about an hour left on the stream, maybe less, honestly, probably more like 45 minutes. Flinner says, have you met very many good faith right-wing libertarians? Most of them seem to be crypto-fascists and white supremacists. They love Trump treading on them. Not very many. Honestly, I have engaged with so many of them, and so many of them are so deceitful. Like, so many of them will say that they believe in a thing, but then in practice, you see they don't really seem to care about it at all. It seems more like a lot of them are really interested in winning arguments, and they're not really interested in what the practical applications of their ideas would look like in the world, nor do they seem to generally have any understanding of how to make their ideas happen in the world. That's not to say I haven't met any. I have. I've met a couple. Mostly in real life, though. Like online, I've met very few good faith anarcho-capitalists. They almost always resort to insults and straw men and misrepresentations of various kinds. Yeah, no, it's not good. And most of them won't listen to what you're saying and take it seriously either. I think that's really the main thing that is lacking when I engage with the anarcho-capitalists, is when I make the critiques of what I think that their society would look like. They have like no defenses, and they don't take seriously the concerns that I'm bringing up. They just act like those things wouldn't happen. They don't engage with it. If they were to just like engage deeply with what I'm saying, and they were to just understand that, yeah, okay, what you're saying could happen, and here's the reasons why I think that you know, there would be a pushback, or these would be the factors which would make it to where that wouldn't dominate the system. They don't do that. And when they do that, they almost always present something which is contradictory to the system they would have laid out. Like, you know, not going into the long rant again. I've already done it so many times on the channel. But like, if that were instead how they approached it, then I would believe that they were in much better faith. But in general, what I find is, as soon as you sort of poke and prod, they always like lash out, and they present a bunch of, how should I put it, previously concealed beliefs that you already suspected they had. Like you said, a lot of them end up being like super racist. A lot of them end up being like very hierarchical in their thinking. And then it becomes this situation where you're just like, why am I even engaging with you? You're deceitful. You're deceiving me. You're trying to tell me you believe in one thing, but it's clear when I pull off the mask that you don't. You believe in something much more nefarious, much more villainous underneath. And so that's why that's been my experience. Like, it's very rare you find a right-wing libertarian for which that is not the case. Hadim says, I'm getting a literature table going at my F&B chapter. Do you have any zines that you would recommend to table? So some of the zines we like to table are Reason, Creativity, and Freedom, Ecology and Revolutionary Thought. Insofar as you're trying to table just an explicitly anarchist zine, Life Without Law. It's a good one. We also table a couple of the essays that I've written. We table Constructing the Revolution and After the Revolution. We table a bunch of stuff. We will table Andrewism's What is Black Anarchism? We will table Elisha Moon Williams' queer social anarchism and Queers with Guns. Those are some of our staples. Those are some of the ones that we table very often. And then we just have a bunch of other zines that we will table situationally depending on who the crowd is that we're around. Ethan Darcy says, still, libertarians were important to liberalizing the cannabis laws, local activists everywhere. That's absolutely true. Not a single, you won't hear me deny that for a single moment. I was part of the legalization campaign of medical cannabis here in the state of Oklahoma. And yeah, there were tons of ANCAPs, lots of them. Yeah, no doubt about that. I wouldn't say otherwise. And that's actually what I meant when I said I've met a couple who actually were principled and weren't being deceitful and didn't talk like a lot of these ANCAPs online. And we had pretty good conversations and they were chill. They didn't say any weird shit and they weren't aggressive, and I didn't get any like racist vibes out of them. But yeah, no, absolutely. There are plenty of ANCAPs and right libertarians who have been very implemental in getting cannabis legalized or medicinalized in a variety of states. That's for sure. But those, honestly, they get a ton of different kinds of people. I met every kind of person on that campaign. I met old conservatives who were down with it. I met old liberals. I met young liberals, young conservatives, ANCAPs, communists, anarchists, like everything. Everybody loves smoking weed. Everybody just wants their weed, okay? Hell's Bells says, do you think the U.S. is heading into a dictatorship? I think it's already a dictatorship. I think that the United States is fascist. This is fascism with the mask off. I think that the United States has been fascist with a mask on for a long time at this point. But I think now we are fascist with the mask off. And that's terrifying in its own right, because it means that they no longer fear any form of retaliation or internal correction. They really believe that now they've got complete control, and so therefore they don't have to hide it anymore. They're evil. They're wicked. Truly, like the most deeply, like I was saying on Twitter that I didn't use these words evil or wicked or demonic beforehand. But those are the only words I can use to describe them. They truly are the worst of humanity, and they're all in power. Our government is filled with all of the worst people in humanity. I just realized that on these live streams, I should probably be like more zoomed in. I should probably be closer. I should probably be more like this. This is a little more engaging. Too late now, I guess, but yeah, this is more engaging, right? You get to. But yeah, no, I mean, we are absolutely in fascism, but I've been saying we're in fascism for years at this point, because especially after Citizens United, once you have the collusion of corporation and state, you're already on the path to fascism. That's when you know that fascism is afoot, because fascism is essentially the collusion of all hierarchical power structures. If people were here for the beginning of the stream, fascism is the chirarchy made manifest at the highest level. It is the chirarchy exacerbated to its furthest extent. So when you hear that hierarchical power structures are beginning to collaborate at large scale, that means that fascism is here. Absolutely. Ethan Darcy says, so fascism started with the Dutch East India Company? Well, it's interesting because that was back in a time where we're talking about the transition out of feudalism and into capitalism. So that was a time we were looking at, like mercantilism. So that's what you're talking about there. And I think that there were definitely some strong elements of fascism there. And that's a big reason why that you see that fascists are always forming coalitions with monarchists. So those coalitions are natural, and they've occurred numerous times throughout history. Fascism, however, is the movement backwards, back towards monarchy while we are still within capitalism, whereas mercantilism was the movement towards capitalism from monarchy, right? So it's different in that sense because it's different in the movement. The movement towards mercantilism was a movement of dismantling the power of the monarchy in a relative sense. Right. I understand that, of course, the corporations were beneficial to the maintenance of the monarchy, but in a general sense, the power of those corporations like the Dutch East India Company relative to the previous concentration of power is a lower concentration of power in the hands of the monarch. And now the system has a more distributed power structure. So yes, they were collaborating, but at that time beforehand, the monarch would have been the supreme power structure, and now it is being more distributed. Whereas fascism is the movement in the opposite direction towards concentration of power from a more distributed system. So that is terrifying, because to move towards a more authoritarian system, there also always has to be extensive domination of the masses. So that means there has to be violence, threat of violence, and deception at an enormous scale. And we see that, of course, in the United States at this moment. We see, ICE is essentially just the new Gestapo. They are just out there brutalizing people all the time. They have suspended due process. They don't care about due process anymore. They don't care about the law. They don't care about any of that. And they're already weaponizing ICE against American citizens. That's been happening for months at this point. So there's that. Then there's the threat of violence, which of course MAGA and Donald Trump and his whole presidency, they're trying to spread a prolific terror among the people. There's your threat of violence. And deception, it's everywhere. I mean, it's literally brain rotting to read the internet right now in the United States. I suspect elsewhere, but especially in the United States. Every comment section is filled full of xenophobic bigotry, the most vile, hateful, misogynistic comments are completely normalized. And they're everywhere. Constant gaslighting. Everybody acting like it, or all the right wing is acting like it's not happening. All the right wing is falling in line behind Trump. Prolific deception from the right wing right now. The most deception I've experienced in my lifetime, hands down. And that's impressive, because the United States is full of prolific deception. But this is the most prolific deception in my lifetime in the United States. So yeah, it's terrifying, because they have to use all of these forms of domination to move back towards the concentration of power, because the concentration of power is actually not popular. It only is made quote unquote popular or made acceptable by the masses because of violence, threat of violence, and prolific deception. So yeah. Like LT said, I checked the comment section under the video of the priest getting shot with pepper balls by ICE, and it was crazy how many people are trying to justify ICE's actions. I suspect that a lot of that is bot networks. I suspect they've got lots of AI pretending to be real people. I don't think that they have nearly as much popular support as it appears. I mean, really think about the fact that Donald Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president at this point in his presidency. He's a deeply, deeply unpopular president. And yet, for some reason, all the comment sections are flooded with people doing apologia for him. I've never learned how that word's said, apologia, apologia, whatever, that are essentially doing propaganda for Donald Trump. They're flooded everywhere. Every single comment somehow has a MAGA chud saying some dumb, bigoted shit. And yet he's deeply unpopular. They are clearly employing enormous bot networks in order to make Trump look more popular. And that is why it is so brain rotting to be on the internet right now, is because so many of the people that we're interacting with aren't even real people. They're fake. Like, they're just hiding behind private accounts. They're just made up accounts. They're AI generating faces to appear as if they're real people. It's all just a big psyop. The right wing is just a psyop on the average person. It's convincing the average person to support things that are against their best interest. And in this era, that psyop is utilizing, in my opinion, huge bot networks to pretend that it is more popular than it is. it's part of the reason why that I think on a long timeline, visual media like this channel is going to last. And that's because it's one of the only ways to verify that somebody is actually real. And I know in the era of AI, that's still not a guarantee, but right now we can still pick out AI as being AI. It still has these little artifacts and a bunch of tells that it is not a real person, whereas real people can do a lot of things to demonstrate that they're real people. So I think as we lose confidence in the veracity of people's identities on the internet, I think that visual mediums where people's faces are on the statements are going to become more popular. And so I think in the long term, something like a YouTube channel, something like this channel is actually going to be it's going to be pretty secure in its longevity. Whether, we'll see if I, am kidnapped by ICE or something. But, insofar as I'm not kidnapped by ICE, I don't think the YouTube channel as a concept is going anywhere. I don't think that, TikTokers are going anywhere because people are losing faith in the veracity of just text media and comments underneath videos and stuff. Apologia, is that what it is? Apologia, bro gave me the pronunciation with the crazy symbols. I don't know what's happening there. Somebody says, as an AI bot, I can confirm this. Cool. Flower Punk says, did you see those absolutely disgusting fascistic comments from Asmongold the other day? Which ones? I mean, he's just said so many fascist things at this point that I don't know what the new thing is. Fifa Fern says the arts are oftentimes looked on as a distraction from important work, but there are positives. We need more horizontal and sustainable arts, and lots of people watching are artists or like arts. I actually don't think they're a distraction. I just think that the movement only focusing on that thing is a distraction. The arts are absolutely necessary. They're part of a process of changing popular consciousness, of spreading liberatory ideas. That's absolutely necessary. That's not going to change. However, they are not sufficient. That's what I should say. Necessary, but not sufficient. I think that's where a lot of people get really mixed up, is they think that, oh yeah, wow, it's really important, like changing popular consciousness, creating a new culture, yeah, that's super important. It's just not enough by itself. So people who spend all their time doing that can sometimes get really caught up in it as if what we need is just more revolutionary art and that will fix the problem. But instead, what we need is those artists to be part of a movement, not just making art all by themselves, and not thinking that a bunch of people making art is enough by itself. But I think art is absolutely extremely important. In fact, the truth is that, I write fiction and I would like to get one of my books published, and I'd like to write a lot more books. And I love writing fiction more generally, whether it has a liberatory message or not. But I have lots of stories in mind that I would love to tell that I think have a liberatory potential. And I really just have to do the work to do that. But I think it is important. So I certainly don't want to give the impression that I think it's not. Most of my criticism about lifestyleism is just that that's all it is. And that's all that those people are doing, and that won't build a movement. Miles Norsworthy says, just one more season of Andor and we'll have fully automated communism. Yeah, exactly. You get it. You get it. Okay, I'm gonna do a poll here. This is the first time I've ever screwed with one of these polls. These are These are not encouraging results. Anark is gone. Damn. Yeah, that's it. And that was it. And that's it. But yeah, no, Sion Verfing says, but my thought process is that revolutionary themed stuff can bring up conversation and possibly spread ideas, but that may be a little far-fetched. No, it's not far-fetched at all. That's absolutely the case. You know, like somebody mentioned Andor. Andor has absolutely been very radicalizing for a lot of people. And that's precisely because it put the same situation that we're in into a different context. And in that context, you can realize how bad it is. But when you see it in this context, it's not as clear because you're like a fish in water. You can't understand the objective context of your situation because you're so stuck in its subjectivity. Right? You're locked in the episteme of knowledge. And so everything seems like it is normal, but when you take the exact same details and put them in a fictional universe, you're like, that is not normal. That's really bad, actually. Also, thank you for the donation of 10,000 COP, which I'm actually not familiar with that currency. I suspect it's not as much as it appears, but I appreciate it. Carlos Andres says, Anark, are there any references to self-organized clinics or hospitals? How would healthcare work in an anarchist society without present hierarchies? Murray, why'd you knock that off? What are you doing? Hey. Move. Move. What are you doing? You don't like a smell? Something smell weird there? He gave me the stink face. What are you doing? Leave it alone. It's the spooky light. That's what creates the spooky. Why are you walking here? You don't need to walk here. Come on, bro. Come on. Here. Hey, stop. Yeah. Oh, also, just for anybody who wasn't here earlier. Oh, sorry, I didn't answer the question, but sorry, I saw this. For anybody who wasn't here earlier, part 4 of A Modern Anarchism by Seditionist Media has been released. And over here, I have the stacks of all the different parts. If you would like to purchase any of the parts, they're $10 each. Just find a way to reach out to me and we can get your, a way for you to pay and your address, and I will get them sent along to you. Just use some kind of DMs, whatever platform you can DM me on, do that. Discord will work, or Twitter will work, or Patreon, whatever you want to use. Those are all good ways to get a hold of me. But you were saying, do I know of any sources that talk about how to do self-organized clinics or hospitals? And I don't know of any sources where that's all they talk about, but I will say the Zapatistas actually run a hospital. And then I don't remember if it was Fejuve or Kika Sosola. I think it was Kika Sosola. Hospital. Is that what it was? Was it Kikasosola or was it? Yeah, Kikasosola, or is it Sikasosola? Sikasosola is what it is. They actually have a horizontal hospital in Venezuela. So, yes, a self-managed hospital that is basically functioning as a cooperative. So highly recommend you go learn about them. That is super interesting. And I actually made a video about it. I did a liberation and action video about them. Sunepor says, is there any way to get a copy of those books in Europe? There absolutely is. And that is you go to Seditionist distribution, Anark. I'll get it brought up for you. Here is the link to part 1. I think you could probably navigate the website to find the rest of the links. But if you are not in the United States, you can use this because I think they are in the UK. So that is someplace it'll be easier for you to order from. Damn, people are still voting in the "Is art going to destroy fascism" poll. This is what I like to see. I'll be right back. That light has been knocked down so many times now. The Feds got Anark again. Yeah, half the stream's just me leaving. Yeah, that's true. That is what's happening. See, by the time I'm ending my streams is always when I have the most people, which suggests to me that I should be probably streaming for much longer than I am. But I have a recurring student that is scheduled like right here in just a few minutes. I'm basically going to have to leave in order to go tutor. So like, it sucks because that's what prevents me from keeping a kind of critical mass. Like right now, like we're kind of at the peak of the number of people who are here, and I should keep going, but unfortunately I have to go do something here in just a few minutes. So basically going to be here for another 15 minutes. So appreciate me while I'm here. Anarchist by day, tutor by night. Carlos Andres Acosta Yaver says, how could be the process to translate the book to Spanish? So a few different parts of the videos have been translated to Spanish, but they've been translated as subtitles. So yeah, that could be helpful. Some people have kind of already done a little bit of that, but yeah, the actual like book itself being translated to Spanish, I don't think the whole essay has been translated just yet. Modern anarchism, Spanish. Let's find out. I mean, maybe it has. I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think it's been translated into Spanish in its entirety at this point. And Sam's asking, what's the plan for the 40 million or so, half of whom are kids, about to go hungry in the US? Yeah, that's something I was talking about earlier in the stream. But, you know, the summary is basically that short term, people need to develop the supply chains with businesses that have overages of food. They need to reach out to food banks and try to help them with distribution. Long term, people need to start learning to grow food. We need to start developing community gardens. We need to get people growing food on balconies in urban areas, in their backyards, in suburban areas, in rural areas. Hopefully people can actually even grow large plots of food. This is all stuff that is necessary in a long-term sense. In a short-term sense, we really need to kind of utilize and expand the food not bombs approach, because that's just kind of like making the best of the situation that we've currently got. But it's going to be bad either way. But the best we can do is just hope to stem some of the bleeding that's going to take place, because it's going to be really bad. It's going to be really bad. Yeah, start a food mutual aid group and start disseminating information on food banks and mutual aid networks. Absolutely. Food not bombs. Absolutely. Yeah. Stuff like that. That's our only approach at the moment. We just need a lot more people for anything to be actually effective. But yeah, developing the entire supply chain from beginning to end, that is the long-term solution to that. You need people first growing, you need people then harvesting, you then need distribution, and that's essentially the whole process. But right now we have really just distribution. We don't have the production. We don't have the harvesting. We have just distribution of what capitalists have already grown. And what we really need is to begin creating our own independent supply chains, so shit like this doesn't happen, or that we can actually seize into the vacuum more effectively. Right now, you know, just to give you an idea though, you know, it's not something you can just snap your fingers and do. Cooperation Tulsa has been developing the land that we've got to make it capable of actually growing food for years. You know, it takes time to build out the infrastructure to grow food. It's something that is not just as easy as waving a magic wand. So if it's something you're interested in, you need to get started now, recognizing it's not something you're going to be able to do in a pinch. You're going to have to figure out how to do it. You're going to have to learn how to grow food. It's much more of a science than it appears. Unions could also be organizing food distribution, also true. Sam says, Anark, are there any Polish anarchists around your community, or are you familiar with any current anarchist groups in Poland? I'm not. However, people here in stream might be. Is anybody familiar with any anarchist groups in Poland? If so, you should post them here in the chat. So RRRR, which I'm tempted to just say is says, very disappointed by the poll, though. Many of my collaborators would get discouraged. I don't know if that means your collaborators think, I don't know what that necessarily means, whether those are the sorts that they're like pro art and now they're hearing that art isn't going to kill fascism, or people who know that art isn't going to kill fascism and they're disappointed to see how many people said yes. I have no idea which, but I will say either way, it's really not that huge of a deal, given that art isn't going to kill fascism by itself. Art is part of the process, but it's certainly not sufficient to destroy fascism. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So I wouldn't be discouraged by the poll. So I do need to end the stream here in just a few minutes, so I have time to get ready before I have to leave. Josiah Jackson says, where should we look to get started on the processes to get food production going? It's easy to Google how to plant food, but it seems like there are better resources if you know where. I'm not sure if I know exactly where you should go, but I think there's this channel. There's a channel I follow that's called like No-Till Gardeners, I think is what they're called. Let's see here. No-Till Gardeners. Is that what it's called? Let me see. No-Till Growers. That's a good channel. I like them. They're cool. But the truth is that you're just going to have to kind of learn by doing. Okay. So like think of a thing you want to grow, and then you need to figure out how to grow it. You need to figure out what kind of soil amendments you're going to need. You're going to need to, just figure out the whole process. And then begin asking yourselves kind of backwards from that. Oh, okay, well, how much is that infrastructure going to cost? How much are seeds going to cost? What kind of space am I going to need? Then that will help inform what kind of development you're going to need in order to learn to grow that food. Aeroponic farming is cool. Direct distribution magic mushroom growing cooperative. There you go. That one is going to change the world. I don't need a poll for that. But yeah. So I guess like happy Halloween or whatever, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I just want to remind you that if you want to support the channel, you should go over to my Patreon, become a patron for any amount. I'll put the whole thing there, and then you can go and you can become a patron. I appreciate everybody showing up to the stream. I need to jump off of here so that I can get ready to go tutor for pretty much the whole night. Who knows if I'll have time to do any kind of festivities. But yeah, I think that's about it. Next week, expect me to release a video on the intersection of Stoicism and anarchism, or really just an analysis of Stoicism from a leftist perspective. Oh, also, thank you here at the end of the stream by Stephen McNelly for $20. He says, thanks again, Dan. Got up early enough to catch you this time. Well, I appreciate you watching the channel, and I appreciate you donating. This is what allows me to continue doing the channel. So if you want to support the channel, there are a lot of ways you can do so. And just spreading the channel around is another one of those ways. Just giving links to people, recommending the essays, and so on and so on. I appreciate everybody who's following. I appreciate everybody who has showed up. And I think that's about it for this one. I'll see y'all next time.